My name is Paul Perlman, and I'm a program director at the NCI Center for Global Health. I want to start by thanking you all for joining us today for our Global Cancer Research and Control seminar series. This seminar series features talks by researchers and cancer control experts working in global oncology and provides opportunities for discussion and collaboration on impactful and innovative work addressing cancer morbidity and mortality worldwide. I'm delighted today to welcome Dr. Chavez Mac Gregor to the center. Dr. Mariana Chavez Mac Gregor is a medical oncologist with clinical practice dedicated for caring for patients with breast cancer. In addition, Dr. Chavez Mac Gregor is a professor at the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center, where she holds a primary appointment in the Health Services Research Department and a joint appointment in the Breast Medical Oncology Department. Her research program focuses on studying patterns of care, outcomes, and disparities. She has extensive experience evaluating cancer care delivery, toxicities, and complications of cancer treatment. Additionally, Dr. Chavez Mac Gregor has been involved in planning, designing, and implementing clinical trials, and is an active member of SWOG, an NCI-funded cancer research network, where she currently serves as the Executive Officer for International Affairs. Today, she will provide an overview of SWOG's strategic expansion into Latin America, emphasizing the scientific, clinical, and educational impact associated with this international outreach. Further, she will discuss key barriers to activating and sustaining clinical trials in the region and future strategies to increase trial access and strengthen global oncology research. Before handing the session over to our esteemed speaker, I'd like to review a few logistics. First, please save your questions for the designated Q&A time immediately following the presentation. You may type your question in the chat box or use the raise hand feature. Second, please note today's presentation is being recorded and will be available on our events website under the Past Webinars tab. Finally, we are now offering CME credits for this seminar series. I will provide additional information on how to claim credits for today's session at the end of the presentation. As a disclaimer, please note that the views expressed in the following presentation are those of the speaker and do not necessarily reflect those of the National Cancer Institute, the National Institutes of Health, the Department of Health and Human Services, or the U.S. government. And now we'll begin our presentation. Welcome, Dr. Chavez Mac Gregor.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much. I'm really honored to be here with you today and be part of this prestigious seminar series. And I'm Mariana Chavez Mac Gregor. I'm a breast medical oncologist at MD Anderson, and I've been serving as executive officer for national affairs at SWOG for a couple of years. And if you get the next one, I don't have any disclosures for this presentation. Next. What we're going to do today, it's really talk about SWOG. Initially, I know that the audience is quite diverse, so we're going to talk about what it's SWOG, why we have had an interest in expanding our work in Latin America, to really walk you through what the last 10 years of this initiative have looked like, to hopefully land on where are we, what are we wanting to go next, and what have been some of the challenges and the opportunities that we see ahead next. So SWOG, for those of you that don't know, it's a major part of the United States publicly funded cancer research infrastructure. SWOG is one out of the 4 United States Cooperative Group Oncology Research Groups that the NCI Clinical Trials Network support. The other groups are listed in the slide. We are also one of 7 research bases in the NCI Community Oncology Program, or NCORP. And what we do is that we design and we conduct multi-institution national clinical trials. We focus on treatment, we focus on public science, and we, in addition, have data studies, secondary analysis, etc. SWOG, it's a really, really large group that it's formed according to committees. So we have disease committees, we have treatment modality committees, we have a large infrastructure that supports this extraordinary work. Now, in your screen, what you see is a brief timeline of SWOG. So we're packing over 60 years of history in one slide, from back in 1956, when the Southwest cancer chemotherapy study group, that was a pediatric group, was formed, and how it really started evolving until it is what is today, after it became the SWOG Cancer Research Network in 2018. So along all these years, next, what SWOG has done and accomplished has been absolutely remarkable. Next slide, please. And we have done this because we've been laser focused on our mission, the mission to significantly improve lives through cancer clinical trials and translational research, or focus its research, but with the goal of improving the lives of those living with cancer. Next. We have members all over the country. There are over 1,300 sites, and this includes NCI designated cancer center, lead academic participating sites. So we are incredibly spread across the country with NCORE sites all over the country. And our members are very, very numerous. And it's not only researchers or science clinicians. It also includes, as you can see in the slide, over 12,000 research nurses, clinical research associates, pharmacists, patient advocates. We have an extraordinary team of patient advocates that help us make sense of our ideas, of our science, that pushes to keep thinking about our patients. So we are a very, very large group. Next. And to give you magnitude of the work at SWOG, this is the participation in the NCTN trials in the last decade or so. And you see two different shades of blue, one more purple. Those are the therapeutic clinical trials. And in blue, you see therapeutic clinical trials. And consistency, you're seeing that there's over 4,000 patients a year that are recruited in our studies, with 2024 being an extraordinary year with close to 6,000 studies, 6,000 individuals that are committing to be joined into this effort of pushing science and progress. So it is really an extraordinary effort that we do, as I said, as part of a team with work in operations in our statistical center. And that's what we do. Next. Now, we have clinical trials across disciplines, different types, but what we have done in the last 6 decades collectively is that SWOG has opened more than 1,400 clinical trials with over 275,000 individuals with cancer enrolled. 14 drugs have been approved by the FDA. So we have changed the standard of care based on this extraordinary work, and almost 110 changes in standard of care. So we, in addition, are holding a database with extraordinary amount of information to do additional studies. We have data banks. So it's an extraordinary resource, and what we are doing, it's very impactful for our participants, but for the broader community. Next. Joe Unger over at the Fred Hutch has been part of SWOG for many, many years, extraordinary talented, and he's done some very innovative analysis to quantify the impact of our work at SWOG. And the figures that you see in the slide are very impactful. Greater than 3.34 million years of life saved based on the science that has come from SWOG, with over 14.2 million years of life saved at a cost of $326 based on what has been invested in these extraordinary efforts. Next. Part of the guiding principle of SWOG, and I think part of the success of us as a group, is that we keep our patients as our absolute highest priority, ensuring that the best science is driving our research. We are fully committed to mentoring and to developing the careers of early stage investigators. I myself was a product of one of our programs at that time was called the Young Stage Investigator. Now we call Early Stage Investigator course back in 2011. So we're really committed to this, but the patients are our absolute priority. Next. And I think that really brings us to talk very briefly of why this is so important and why publicly funded research it's key. And this type of research through SWOG funded by the NCI allows us to be innovative in the questions that we're asking, studying less expensive treatment options, for example, studying optimization, conducting research studies that pharmaceutical companies are not going to do, combine different drugs from different sponsors, allow development of therapies in rare diseases that otherwise no pharmaceutical company is going to be that interested in doing, addressing optimal dosing. We may know already the standard of care, we may have extraordinary drugs, but we may need to address these very important questions, including testing multimodality therapies. And all of this are truly research questions that are relevant, that are going to change the lives of patients, but are very hard to otherwise conduct outside of the publicly funded research infrastructure. Next. This is another slide that truly lists other of the many reasons what we do, it's very important, including assessing cost effectiveness, providing data for registry studies, and addressing other issues that are fundamental, like survivorship, palliative, and end-of-life care, as well as quality of life issues. So what we do next, it's very important. And just to show you in a more different type of formats, like, if you see the goals of therapeutic clinical trials are very different if they come from a commercial sponsor than if they come from a public sponsor. What we're really trying to do is optimize the treatment, provide the best treatment to our patients, create knowledge, improve public health, and those are our goals. If you think about the mission of SWOG, the patients are at the forefront. Next. So I hope that over the last, 5-10 minutes, I've convinced you that what we do at SWOG, it's incredibly important. We're changing lives. And if it's so important, then why not to expand next? And that's what really, it's bringing us to talk about Latin America and why we are so laser focused in Latin America. Well, we have partnered with other international sites. It's truly the SWOG Latin America Initiative, or SLI, or SLAY, depending how you pronounce it, what has kept us really busy. And what we know is that Hispanics are the largest minority in the United States. I came from Mexico. There's every time more and more of us that are part of the makeup of the United States. The number of cancer cases among Hispanics are increasing. Hispanics tend to be a young population in the United States, but we are getting older. And as you can see in the slide, the Hispanic population by 2060, it's anticipated to reach 111 million. And that is just 35 years from now. Next. We know that Latin America and the Hispanic population, it's incredibly diverse. And as that becomes the makeup or part of the makeup of the epidemiological makeup of the United States, studying or including Hispanic populations in our trials, it's a look into the future of what cancer is going to look in the United States. So we truly believe that it's crucial that our clinical trials, this extraordinary infrastructure that I told you about, it's also enriched with a population that it's going to reflect the makeup of the United States. Next. To give you a little bit of history, the Latin America Initiative started actually as a short-term proof of principle over 10 years ago with a project that was funded by the Gates Foundation, aiming to eradicate Helicobacter pylori as a cause of gastric cancer. It was a very successful study. A number of publications came from that, and really opened the possibility to developing lasting relationships between SWOG and key institutions in the region. Next. And the last 10 years have looked a little bit like this. The initiative launched in 2009 with the National Cancer Institute in Mexico being the first country to join. We've gone through different leadership through SWOG, one of the original minds behind SWOG. John Crowley is still incredibly involved, and it's sort of like our Northern Star guiding us and supporting the initiative, a true believer. He was part of the investigators of that Helicobacter pylori work. And since then, we've joined different teams, different countries have joined. In 2018, Alejandro Moar, who was the former NCI Mexico director, became the executive officer next. And this is the way that not that long ago the slide looked like. When I joined about 3.5 years ago, there were 6 members. And while we marked them in the map as countries, the reality is that we're talking about sites. So we have the National Cancer Institute in Mexico, the INEN in Peru, the National Cancer Institute in Colombia, the Universidad de la República in Uruguay, GOCHI, that it's cooperative group in Chile, and La COG in Brazil, but they are just actually a site. Next. Some of the things that the initiative has done is that it has allowed the enrollment on trials that are hard to enroll in the United States. And this is a case study of this success. S1316, it's a clinical trial that wanted to ask the question of what's the optimal treatment for patients with malignant bowel obstruction, a complication of advanced cancers that we know compromises quality of life. About 200 patients were enrolled, and there's a component where patients could have been randomized, and only about a quarter of those patients allowed or elected to be randomized. So about 50. So I just wanted to look at the slide and see the bars in red. Out of the patients randomized, I told it was about 50. 16 came from Latin America. So in a way, the participation of Latin America, as described in the quote by Dr. Krause, the principal investigator, was key to the success of that trial. In the big waterfall, you see, for example, the number of patients enrolled at MD Anderson. That's where I work. It's one of the largest cancer centers in the world. 2 patients were enrolled. And if you see the National Cancer Institute in Mexico enrolled 8, the INEN in Peru enrolled 7. So we start to demonstrate that we can help conduct clinical trials that are of national importance in the United States. Next. So I'm going to tell you what the last few years have looked like. I was invited by our chair, Charles Blanky, to join the initiative about 3.5 years ago. Part of what I think made him think of me was that I'm from Mexico. I understand the healthcare system in Latin America, but I train here and I practice here. And I took on the challenge, and I was very fortunate to partner up with Aisha Kristen, who has been our program manager. And her story is very interesting because she actually was part of SLI early on in her career in that H. pylori study. Then she was consultant to help with some very specific tasks, and she's our program manager. And when we thought about what we wanted to do, the first goal was to open the initiative to all, not make it part of a small group within SWOG that had interest in Latin America, but open it, understanding that this is relevant for all of us and can have implications for all the science that we conduct at SWOG. We decided to do that by engaging and disseminating all of our activities and being very structured about what we do. We decided that as part of our SWOG biannual group meetings. One in the spring, was in the fall. We're going to have seminars. We're going to invite different committees to help us think about ways to collaborate. And we're going to write a newsletter to disseminate to all the members of that receive communication from SWOG, to let them know what we do, who we are, and who are the investigators behind these efforts in the region. It was very important for us to increase engagement and participation on committees from our investigators in Latin America, in order to promote scientific discussion and also work with our operations team and protocol teams to formalize the process for internal participation, making a formal assessment for barrier activation, and of course, building community and partnerships with the sites, with the international sites, with SWOG, to really create bi-directional engagement that has been truly extraordinary for all. We're part of SWOG and we share a lot of the same values. And because of that, we're committed to train the next generation oncology researchers also in the region, conducting local conferences, and through the support of the Hope Foundation, to also have a spot in our early stage training investigator course to one of the investigators in Latin America. Next. So about 2 years ago, we held a strategic plan with leaders from SWOG to really think about what's our goal, what we want to do, what barriers we're going to have to face, and how we get buy-in from our leadership. And of course, we want to align our mission to that of SWOG's. And our mission is to improve the lives amongst Hispanic populations through supporting cancer clinical trials and translational research. So it's very similar to what SWOG does. It falls under SWOG's umbrella, and this is becoming our guiding principle. Next. So in order to do that, we have a number of goals, and our list of goals keeps growing. I'm just going to share some of that with you. But what we want is to establish excellence in clinical research, including best practices in study design, data collection, and management in Latin America through investment in clinical research. We want to do that by facilitating participation in our studies and creating opportunities. But really, we're talking about capacity building and knowledge exchange. In order to do that, we're part of SWOG, and what we do, our sites get payment from patients that enroll, but we don't cover their expenses. This is a partnership where we, through the SWOG Foundation, are supportive the initiative, but each site, it's incredibly committed to train, to learn, to establish new processes, to really be able to implement and activate our studies. Next. It's very important for us to try to identify and support those clinical trials where, a Latin American investigator can be part of, where their patients can be part of. And one way to do that, it's also to understand which ones are the relevant cancers to Hispanic populations. You have heard in your seminar series before what's happening colorectal cancer, younger patients. The same thing it's happening in Latin America. A lot of what we're seeing here to occur in Hispanic populations. So we're having to understand and learn a lot about what's happening epidemiologically in the region to then identify which ones can be the trials that can be successful to open in partnership. I shared with you how broad the platform of trials it's at SWOG, and we cannot open all. So we need to be very familiar with what is possible, what is relevant, so we can also serve the slide as the link to inform the United States-based investigators about all the potential collaborations with the region. Next. And in order to, I think we're going to one back. Yeah. So we have to identify trials that will be successful. This has been some of the areas that we have spent a lot of time trying to understand from previous failures or challenges, why we were not able to accrue to some studies, why we were not able to open some studies. And we had to do a deep dive into what are the actual barriers to activation and to enrollment, because it takes a lot of work to activate each one of the studies in Latin America. Think about our protocols. They are all in English. They have to be translated. We don't have funds for that. The sites have to do that. So it requires a lot of work, and the identification of the key trials has been very, very important task for us. Next. And that brings us to really think about understanding and reducing those barriers. And we have changed processes within SWOG with the support of our leadership and the operations office to really start thinking about the possibility of enrolling in Latin America since the concept of a trial it's being developed. So as we progress through the different steps of protocol development within SWOG since the beginning, now we want the default to be yes, we can activate trials there, and then let's think maybe why not, and be a exclusion process later on rather than since the beginning, exploring solutions to legal and financial barriers, and really exploring and thinking outside the box on how we can bring these trials to our sites. That, by the way, went through the vetting process that all the SWOG sites get through state, they get Department of State approval, et cetera, et cetera. Next. And I just want to show you some images of some of our accruals throughout the last, years. This is data and accrual from sites in the slide since 2011. Next. And this is a different way of seeing it, not by country, but by study. And I think that tells you a lot about how there's studies that we can really accrue. There's some that's very hard. So it's make us really think, without you knowing what the characteristics of these studies are, there's some studies where we can be incredibly successful. So we need to think about the characteristics of the studies, the characteristics of the sites, and what are we facing. Next. So we have learned that some of the challenges that we face throughout this decade has to do with membership and contracts. All of this is challenging for sites in Latin America. Think about language, just to begin with, State Department clearance, SAM.gov renewal, and all these things that are challenging as we evolve in our regulatory process here in the States are incredibly challenging in our Latin American countries, particularly since there's no necessarily offices that will handle this, and it's our investigators themselves and their teams that have the task to conduct all of this documentation and paperwork. Next. We need to acknowledge that there are differences in standard care in the region, particularly with drug availability. So our investigators have been incredibly excited and motivated in bringing cutting edge research with new drugs to their sites. But these new drugs are compared with standard care. And when this standard care is not fully available in our sites in Latin America, that has been an issue. Drug shipment has been incredibly complicated. So even if they have the standard care, the new drug or the drug that it's being studied, shipping it internationally has been very, very hard. SWOG does not have the capacity to do that. And so far, CTEP has not been fully engaged, and we are working with them to try to do it, because we want to do it when we can be successful. We have actually explored talking directly with the pharmaceutical companies locally, with the help of our local investigators, to engage them and try to work with them for them to take on drug shipment to the sites. Specimen collection and shipment has been challenging. Translational research, as I discussed in the mission statement for SWOG, it's important. And sometimes these United States specific requirements are hard for sites to meet, particularly when you think about the timeline or when they're very time-sensitive endpoints, just because of cost, we may have to do it in bulk or get very specific authorization, request specific approval from government agencies locally to be able to do that. We've had issues with translations that our investigators take on their teams. And we've seen through that challenge incredible partnership occurring where the sites will rotate who's translating, who takes care of the amendment, who works on the informed consent. So it's been an incredible partnership that has developed out of some of those challenges. Has also allowed some of the sites to understand their own limitations and push internally to overcome that. And then, of course, the realistic challenge of having multiple regulatory systems. We have a strict national regulations here in the United States, and they also have important regulations. And sometimes these two regulations are not compatible. We have learned, for example, of some of our countries that require civil responsibility insurance for those enrolling clinical trials, meaning the sponsor has to pay an insurance that will cover anything that goes wrong. Completely different from the way that we conduct clinical trials in the United States, where the sponsor takes care of the difference, but the standard of care, it's covered by patient's insurance. Next. And this, for example, was a lesson that we had to learn with our partners in Brazil. They were partners for a brief period of time. We all were very excited by this powerhouse joining our initiative, but their regulatory system was incompatible with ours. In Brazil, in order to open a clinical trial, the sponsor has to cover for absolutely everything component of that individual's care. Standard care visits, blood work, scans, and we wouldn't have funds to cover for that because it's completely different from the structure that we follow within the NCTN network. So in, incredible friendly terms, we had to, part ways because we couldn't activate any studies, which is what we both wanted. So also learning about how, as we potentially could engage with other sites in the region in the future, it's key to understand our goals, our capacities, and whether our regulatory systems are compatible or not. Next. So I shared with you briefly that some of the things that we've engaged are dissemination and engagement. And we really thought that a newsletter could be a very good way to start doing this. So we have a biannual newsletter. Our first issue was in the summer of 2022. And what we do is that we talk about our activities. We talk about the things that we discuss in the seminar. We talk about the studies that we have activated. And we have truly increased awareness of the SWOG Latin America Initiative. I can say that most people that are part of SWOG that come to our meeting have heard about this slide. We are open to everybody, and we actually like SLI investigators to get to know our history, about our activities, about what we do, and welcome them to join us and to welcome into their committees the investigators from the region. We have engagement from different leaders in SWOG. Our patient advocates have been incredibly supportive. And we like to talk about the people because I think that's what has helped us create this extraordinary network and sense of community within this slide. Next. Another of the big activities in our program has to do with education. We conduct, with the leadership of Daisha, Spanish education for CRAs. We've pushed and we've been very successful in getting support from SWOG and even getting some of our training in clinical research conduct, all those videos and modules that we have done in Spanish for the local teams. In addition of the symposium that I told you about, a key part of our work has been engaging and partnering with our local sites to conduct local training conferences. I've been part of the last 3 Uruguay 2022 Colombia 2023, and more recently Peru in 2024. And these have been extraordinary experiences. Again, we partner with the sites. They commit a lot of their time, their resources, their talent. For some of us to go in person, a lot of people attending virtually, open this education to the region truly, to talk about training aspects of clinical research, but training also that it's relevant to the sites in areas that are relevant to the site. We have had the pleasure and privilege to partner in a way indirectly with ASCO. We have had Julie Graylo, the Chief Medical Officer of ASCO, join us. Also, the Director of Centra joining us and actually being part of these activities, also bringing their global message to our conferences. What you see at the top is John Crowley and Rachel Saxton talking to some of the local investigators, because something that we do, it's a hands-on work. Investigators locally submit their research proposals. We select some of them, and we actually in workshops discuss them. They present them, and we give them feedback, ideas on how to improve, how to make that research relevant for their sites, something that has been truly, truly an extraordinary experience for them. Next. So we are today. Today we have grown a lot, and from having sometimes 2 or 3 clinical trials, today we have 15 different clinical trials that are recruiting or about to activate. And you can see how after the pandemic that the numbers in accrual suffer, and with this incredible push, we're seeing record numbers of accrual in the region in 2024. Next. If we go to the last 12 months, 2025, we are quite likely in trajectory to have similar accruing. We are doing incredible well. Our sites have constant participation and engagement with sometimes internal weekly calls, monthly calls, group calls. We are always looking which are the trials that are coming, how we can activate, how we can overcome the barriers, how we can do it a reality. Next. And just to put things in perspective, this is the accrual by membership category in SWOG. All of SWOG, those close to 6,000 patients that I told you that were accrued in 2024, 5% of them came from this line. And when we think about 5 countries, it's really representation of 5 countries, but it's 5 sites. So SWOG has over 1,300 sites, and 5 of them accrue 5% of all our patients. So really showing the great effort from everybody involved and the success of this initiative. Next. So as I start thinking about closing, my conversation with you, I think there are 2, words, I guess it's 3 words that make me think about, the SLI and SWOG, and it's commitment and then team effort. SWOG leadership and the Hope Foundation, that it's the foundation that supports SWOG, have been incredibly committed to this work. And we have worked as part of a team with everybody involved. We are increasing the number of protocols available to our Latin American sites, and we're doing that by identifying those trials that are feasible and that are relevant for Hispanic communities here and there. We're actively working on reducing barriers, and we keep learning about some, and these barriers change, and these barriers are different country to country. There might be some that are common to the region, but they're unique to each side. We are working to adapt when possible our protocols, maybe be less rigid, and partner with the investigators in SWOG, the main investigators on the protocol, to really think, do we really need that blood sample at that time and be shipped in real time? Or can we adapt and think about what is feasible that can also bring gains in terms of diversity and accrual numbers to the parent trial? We continue to be incredibly supportive of education and career development. I mentioned briefly the early stage investigator training course. There are 3 of our Latin America initiative investigators that have been part of it. Javier Retamales, Doctoria Revelado, and Ivan Lira from Chile, Brazil, and Uruguay, respectively. Particularly Dr. Retamales and Dr. Lira, the 2 at the extreme, have been incredibly involved. I can say that I truly believe that being part of SWOG has transformed their careers. They're part of our team, and they have our clinical researcher blood flowing through their veins, and we're helping them foster that curiosity and that value for research and for science. So they are actually conducting research locally. They've engaged in different grant writing protocols, et cetera, here. So as I close, let me give you with some thoughts. Next. We're growing. It's not been easy, but we're growing, and we're very proud of what we have done. We are increasing activation accrual. We are increasing committee membership and scientific contributions. We are digging into new areas like the possibility of lymphoma through the leadership of a group of members within SWOG that are truly devoted to the care of patients with liquid malignancies. We are trying to engage in new areas where we really have not been previously active. We are increasing the training in local teams by training them in Spanish and helping the teams to work together. So our sites, our CRAs in Mexico and Peru, in Chile, in Colombia, to work together to learn about our process. We continue to increase early career investigator opportunities and helping develop the research proposals, and really engage with SWOG members and other cooperative groups. For example, Peru just this week activated Energy B008, a very important clinical trial from Energy that it's suffering in accrual. And we could, in the Latin America Initiative, hopefully help activate those studies and improve accrual. So next. As I said, and as I've mentioned, clinical trials have demonstrated that they can improve care. International sites do have many barriers that need to be overcome. We need to learn about them. We need to think about how we can fix them. Some of them we might not. But the reality is that Latin America has a unique opportunity to, with high quality, conduct research that can help improve the health of their people and the Hispanics in the United States. And I want to, really make us think about that. It's not only about them. It's not about us. It's about like what we can do together to benefit of individuals living with cancer. I think this contributes to fulfill SWOG's mission that puts the patient at the forefront. So we can do it. It's hard. It takes time. It can be frustrating. But I think what we have done, improving the infrastructure, creating capacity, has been incredibly, at least at a personal level for me, very, very rewarding. Next. So I'm not going to be naive and not acknowledge that, we have a lot of plans for the future. There's some uncertainties. And as the funding environment changes, there's some things that make me, fear for the initiative, or at least concern. But instead of going on that, I really want to think about this quote from Alan Watts that you can see on your screen, where I think, way to make sense of change, it's going to be just getting into it. And we're going to keep working, because what we do, it's very important, it's very relevant, it changes people's lives, it's changed teams, it's created community. And as I show the examples of some very talented investigators, I think it's created change and catalyze their careers in ways that it's going to be transformative for their own teams and their own sites. So with that, next I will finish. Of course, this is the Latin America Initiative. So gracias a todos. We have an extraordinary team. I couldn't list everybody that has made this happen, but of course, our core team works incredibly hard. We couldn't do any of this without the support from SWOG leadership and our operations team. The Hope Foundation really funds our work, and we're in debt to them. They have made this work. But there are a number of committee leaders and SWOG investigators. For example, I mentioned, this innovative work in lymphoma that was all initiated by Dr. Luis Malpica, lymphoma investigator, that it's part of us, and a number of local teams that really work in addition of their regular assistential responsibilities to help us exist and conduct this research. So with that, I will finish, and thank you all for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chavez Mac Gregor, for a terrific presentation. We'll now open the session for questions. We invite you to turn on your cameras if you're comfortable, so that we can see each other during the discussion. And as a reminder, you may type your question in the chat box or use the raise hand feature and wait to be called on. When called on, please unmute yourself and ask your question. We'll get to as many questions as we can in the remaining time. I also think I may take the moderator's prerogative and sort of kick off the Q&A. I'm curious, in line with a lot of the mentoring work and training work that you're doing, if you're also starting to move towards investigator-initiated protocols coming from the Latin American investigators.
Yeah, so that's one of our dreams. That's one of our goals. And we have done it. I think for investigator-initiated trials, something that is challenging, it's of course funding. SWOG conducts research that is supported by the NCI. So we have to think about clinical trials that are relevant to SWOG, to the country. One of the investigators highlighted there that it's actually on the call. I just saw his name. Ivan Lira actually worked with the GI committee and develop a concept, develop idea, develop a protocol. But in the nature of the process of funding, that project, that protocol was not supported by the GI steering committee at the NCI. So I think locally now he and others are looking at ways to gathering potential other sources of funding to conduct it at a smaller scale in the region. Now, part of the work that we do in this training courses or training programs, that is research that it's relevant to the region. So some of the protocols that are being developed in our courses, that is work that some of the early investigators, even young or early faculty or trainees are conducting as part of their thesis, their dissertation. So while we're not directly involved with it, we're providing advice, mentoring. Dr. John Crowley, he by background is a biostatistician, and he's been extraordinarily generous with his time, providing advice and feedback to all of these applicants. And we, in addition, try to bring people to train. There's the SWOG John Crowley award. It's an award that it's going to provide training in biostatistics. We have the early stage training investigator program. And what is beautiful, I think, about this group, this community, is that it's expansive, right? Then I can see individuals like Dr. Retamales, that it's been incredibly involved, and also actually he's conducting a study in the region with a grant from the Hope Foundation. He now has his own mentees. So you know how it is, you learn and then you teach others. So it's part of our goal. And ideally, I mean, we would love to see an idea coming from the slide to make it to a national trial. But in order to do that, we have to get people familiar with our system. We have to get them into our committees. We have to get them familiar and engaged with other investigators, right? So it's a process, and that's why I think that the wide view of 10 years that have gotten us to an incredibly successful 2024. I mean, it takes a long time to get here, but that's one of the plans for the future.
Thank you so much. It sounds like I asked the right question. We have a question in the chat from Dr. Coronel. Does SWOG SLY have a job board with listings for their partner institutions?
I didn't hear if we have a
job board with listings for partner institutions. That's in the chat.
So in terms of growth, the answer is no. At this point, we are not growing into adding more institutions. We are open to it, but that's something that we will decide in the big picture with SWOG leadership. And the background of that comes from the experience with Brazil, right? It takes a lot of work and effort to get a site vetted by the Department of State and being fully engaged. And we need, if we're going to do that, we need to make sure that they and we have the capacity to do it. We do receive calls from different sites that might be interested in like breast specific trials, but we need to look for sites that have a broader umbrella so we can potentially participate in all the sites. So hopefully, yes, in the future we'll be potentially strategic about that to make sure that it's going to be a successful collaboration.
Excellent. Other questions?
I think Satish raised his hand.
Dr. Gopal?
Sure, Paul, there's a question in the chat. Do you want to do that one first?
Oh, I see it just popped up. So we have a question from Dr. Calvo. He says, hello, I'm based in Panama with a strong clinical research background, U.S. local institutions. Can we set up a time to talk? The country is launching a national cancer research initiative in August.
Absolutely. I'm typing my email in the chat.
Okay, and Satish?
Yeah, thanks, Paul, and thanks, Mariana. It's great to see you, and thanks for a wonderful talk. You talked briefly about, I think you mentioned very quickly, SWOG trying to help NRG potentially with enrollment into a trial, and I'm wondering your thoughts on how transferable this experience within SWOG might be to other cooperative groups. Obviously, part of the reason the NCTN structure exists is to achieve better integration and coordination across the cooperative groups. They all have their own ways of working and different areas of focus, but I'm wondering, do you think that that is a realizable possibility, or based on what you all have learned in SWOG, and are those discussions happening with any of the other cooperative groups? Thanks.
So thank you, Satish, and thanks again for the invitation. I think it's possible. Each one of the cooperative groups works differently. Something that has been quite feasible is to work with our sites that already have the Department of State approval, that are already part of SWOG, and try to use them in the proper sense of the word, like a U.S. site, right? If SWOG site can open an energy trial here in Houston, why not our site in Mexico, right? They're vetted, they've had extraordinary results on their audits. So we have a process when our sites are interested in one of the trials from the larger network. We are approaching the site. They have to be okay with it. They, because the translations, because the shipment, et cetera, and they have been quite flexible. So energy, we are also about to activate energy 009. I'm sorry, another breast trial, and we are starting to communicate with Alliance in an optimization trial, and they all have been very supportive to have our sites be part of that. Again, it's true partnership, because then our sites have to work very hard on making it work, right? In reading the protocol, identifying, anticipating those barriers, translating all the materials. But the answer is yes. We've found it that they're open to it.
Wonderful. Do we have a last question from anyone in the audience? Okay. Seeing none, I want to thank our speaker once again. This was absolutely wonderful and highly educational.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to share part of our work. Thank you.
So that concludes our session for today. A very special thank you once again to Dr. Chavez Mac Gregor and to all of you for joining us. Don't forget to join us for our next session on September 11th with Dr. Nimi Ranganathan from Duke University. To register for the full slate of upcoming webinars, visit our event website at events.cancer.gov/CGH/GCRCSS. To find more about upcoming events and global health news, visit our website at cancer.gov/global health. You can also visit events.cancer.gov/CGH/GCRCSS to register for future seminars in the series.
U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, National Institutes of Health, National Cancer Institute, cancer.gov, 1-800-4-CANCER.